Now, thank you everyone for joining us. My apologies for the bit of a delay. Um, this is what happens when you're my age and you have to work with technology you're not familiar with. All right. So, just a few funnies to get the day started. Here's hoping your grandma doesn't get run over by a reindeer and that she's not covered by insurance if it does happen, worst of both worlds. Getting older is like visiting an all-you-can-eat buffet. What should be hot is cold, what should be firm is limp, and the buns are bigger than anything else on the menu. And I'm not going to admit to knowing that. And this is one of my favorites. Kids growing up today aren't going to remember a day that they go through without taking a single picture. It's amazing how things have changed for us in the world. So today we're going to touch on a few introductions. We're going to touch on traveling during the pandemic, COVID coverage and what's available, and any questions that you might have. Now, Lori sends her apologies. She was unwell today, but she normally does the presentations. She is the one who compiled all of this information, but you'll have to listen to my squeaky voice for the next hour. We're going to try and keep it to an hour. Lori made her career in the insurance industry working at Blue Cross, Cooperators, and Sun Life. And she's worked specifically with a travel insurance company for 5 years. She's currently in charge of individual travel insurance product development and account management. And she joined MediQuote back in 2005. I'm Pam Langevin. I don't know if I've spoken to any of you. If I have, hi, nice to see you. I joined MediQuote in 2010, and I often say that unless something really drastic happens, I'm going to retire here. I love what I do and the people I do it with. I've been doing travel medical since then. I did 5 years of property insurance prior to joining MediQuote, and currently I'm in charge of training new brokers as we hire them. We're joined by Matt Sleto. He's our wonderful IT and marketing team leader. He joined just before I did, so he's a bit senior to me. And he sends out our newsletters, updates our websites, and he's going to make sure everything runs smoothly today. So if I goof up, he can put me on the right track. MediQuote Insurance Brokers has been providing travel insurance as an independent travel insurance brokerage firm since 1994. We provide our clients with an unbiased perspective on a varied range of travel and medical insurance products. Our focus is on finding the best option that works for you and what your travel plans are. Travel during the pandemic. This all started back on March 13th of 2020. And I'm sure you can all remember very clearly what you were doing and where you were when it all started to happen. The government travel advisory currently remains in effect, and this is now going on 9 months. This affects coverage for COVID on any regular insurance policy that you may already have and any that you're planning to buy. Even though the land borders remain closed, air travel is still permitted during the government travel advisory. So they can't stop you from boarding a plane. However, they are very careful to advise Canadians that if you are at a destination, they aren't going to be offering any repatriation flights to get you back home in an urgent situation, simply because the advisory to not travel has been made. And this makes it challenging for any snowbirds who want to go south, especially when you rely on your vehicle while you're down there. So we're going to talk about not only the insurance side, but what some people are doing to alleviate that concern of not having their vehicle. You can fly with a question mark. Yes, you can. Air Canada is trying to make it more comfortable by advising on their website that they have flexible booking options and letting you know what those are, as well as having a very clear and visible cleaning priority, so that clients and flyers know that their airlines are being cleaned. It's an effort to make sure everybody feels comfortable and safe while traveling. WestJet has offered no charge COVID travel insurance coverage along with their tickets. You do have to be very aware that they can be limited to the number of days that you travel, as well as limited to the amount of coverage that is provided. Sunwing has followed suit and is advertising the same thing. COVID coverage to be, added to your ticket. Again, making the travel package even more attractive. But when you look into the background of the policy wording, you're going to find that this is Sunwings in specific, but the WestJet one, you have to look into the background as well. Travel is limited to 22 days on Sunwing. I believe it's 21 in WestJet. The coverage for COVID on Sunwing's policy is limited to $200,000. So if you ended up in an ICU down in the States after $200,000, your medical expenses for COVID after that are your responsibility. So airline coverage is there. It's free, but you don't qualify unless your trip is 21 days or less, and unless coverage is limited to and your coverage is limited to 200,000. I am sorry, I have to move my screen for a moment. I'm not seeing my chat window. There we go. Okay, so I should have started by saying, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat window. We'll answer them as they come up, and we're also going to reserve some time at the end of the presentation for any questions that you might have. WestJet and Air Canada have both entered into a COVID-19 testing agreement with Hawaii. And what this agreement is they will provide testing for COVID-19 upon departure. And if that test comes back negative and the turnaround time is 72 hours, upon your arrival in Hawaii, you are not required to quarantine. So it's again a way to encourage travelers to choose that destination, to choose that airline, and to feel safe while doing so. Now, this is a couple who came up with a unique solution. They needed their vehicle down south and they wanted to go. However, they can't drive across the border. What they decided to do was hire a shipping company, a transport company, to transport their vehicle across the border. And they flew and they met their vehicle down there. Now, of course, that does add to the cost, because now you have the cost of the flight, you have the cost of your insurance, and your cost to transport your vehicle. However, they felt it was more economical than trying to rent a vehicle while down south or use taxis anytime they needed to travel. So it gave them the freedom to go and to avoid driving across the border, because they can't do that at the moment. And this strategy can certainly be called a loophole in the border restrictions. So the challenge, of course, is to find that transport company that will take your vehicle across for you. And then where are you going to meet that vehicle? and all of those details. We have done some research. We do have the name of a couple of companies that are willing and able to do that. If that's information you would like from our office, feel free to give us a call or send us an email, and we'll provide what we have found to you. Of course, each quote is going to be based on an individual basis, so we don't have the costs involved in doing that. There is an Arrive Canada phone app that is now in place. There are a lot of countries and locations that are doing a mandatory quarantine upon arrival at your destination. And that depends on the country itself. We were just talking about Hawaii, and if you test negative, you don't have to quarantine. However, when you come home, there is currently a mandatory 14-day quarantine that is required after international travel. As of November 21st, that requirement has been extended to include, prior to boarding your aircraft to come home, making sure that you log into the app and register your quarantine plan. That plan will include how you're going to get from the airport home, what you're going to do about groceries when you arrive home, and those details. Evelyn, you're wondering if you can drive your vehicle back into Canada. Currently, there is nothing in place that would prevent you from coming home across the border. Again, you will be advised about quarantine rules, and you will be asked to provide those details at that time. The cautionary note is, of course, that could change, and we don't know when or if it would. Once you know you are going and how you're going to get there, you need to decide on how much coverage is enough for COVID. In the chat window, Matt has just included a link. If you could click on that link for me and place your votes. Let us know what you feel is sufficient coverage for that COVID-19 illness. So I'll wait just a few minutes. There we go. Okay, so the votes are in. It's 1 million or 5 million that are seemed as the best. Well, after working insurance for a long time, 1 million is definitely good. Anything 2 million or better is even better. It's that comfort level of knowing that you have enough coverage to cover a lot of medical situations. So the next question is often, how much is it going to cost? Typically every year, insurance travel costs go up related to the US medical inflation. And it's very specifically the US medical inflation because the US medical costs can have a greater inflation rate than just their standard inflation rate. So the insurance companies monitor that. They want to make sure that you're covered enough and that they're assuming enough risk to make sure that you're covered properly. Your next age bracket could affect your price. So if you were 74 last year and you're 75 this year, that would put you into a new age bracket, and it will affect your price even if your health hasn't changed. The next thing, of course, is a change in health that could impact your pricing. You know, last year you may not have been on any medications. This year you may be on a diabetes medication. That's going to put you into a different rate category and will affect your overall price. And of course, this year we're now seeing that COVID coverage is adding anywhere from a 10% surcharge in order to make sure that they're being covered for that eventuality if it were to occur. What do I need to know about COVID coverage? Here are some of the most frequently asked questions that we hear on a regular basis around here. I already have an annual plan that I paid for, and it doesn't expire for a few months. Can I use that? Well, currently, annual plans have two types of exclusions in the background that are impacted by a travel advisory. And you need to know which one your policy has to know whether or not you can use that policy for any further travel. The first type of travel advisory says that your medical costs are excluded or not covered if you travel to a country, region, or city for which the Canadian government has issued an official travel advisory to avoid all or to avoid all non-essential travel regarding the country, region, or city of your destination before your departure date. If the travel advisory is issued after your departure date, this exclusion does not apply to claims for an emergency or medical condition unrelated to the travel advisory. So put that in plain English, this clause says that if the Canadian government has issued a travel advisory before your departure date for your destination and you choose to travel anyway, you are not covered for any medical costs while you travel on that policy. So their opinion is that if the Canadian government deems this to be serious enough to issue a travel advisory and you're traveling anyway, you're going to assume any medical costs. And of course, the caveat to that at the very bottom was that if the travel advisory was issued after your departure date, they would still cover you for anything unrelated to that advisory. All right, JV, you're asking if the COVID coverage is either in Canadian dollars or US dollars. All of the policies that we issue, the limit of coverage is based in Canadian dollars, which is why we recommend no less than $1 million. And of course, anything above that is better. The second type of exclusion that you'll see in a policy is that medical costs are not covered for any act of terrorism or medical condition you suffer or contract when an official travel advisory issued by the Canadian government states to avoid all non-essential travel or avoid all travel regarding the country, region, or city of your destination before your effective date. This exclusion does not apply to claims for an emergency or medical condition unrelated to the travel advisory. So if your policy has this clause, what this is saying is that you are covered for any medical condition or medical related costs that are not related to the travel advisory. So if this type of clause is in your policy and you chose to travel right now, if you sprained your ankle, you would be covered. If you suffered a broken arm, you would be covered. If you had your appendix burst and it was not related to COVID in any way, you would be covered. However, any medical costs related to COVID would not be covered by this policy due to the fact that there is currently a travel advisory. And at all times, this is a website that you should have access to or should keep in the back of your mind anytime you travel to check for travel advisories. Now, this is how it appears currently. Currently, there's a global travel advisory. When this is removed, what it will be is it will be a site that you can go to, you can key in your destination, and you can read how the Canadian government is advising travelers on whether or not they should be traveling to that destination. And it's specifically by destination. Currently, it happens to be global. I need to buy a policy. What coverage is out there to purchase? Well, up until July of 2020, we had absolutely no options to provide coverage for COVID. Um, we were continually keeping abreast of the situation and contacting insurance companies, and they were all talking about it, but it just seemed nobody wanted to make that commitment. And finally, in September, some options became available. And that improved in October when we had 4 options that would provide and offer COVID benefits. But with all travel policies, the thing to keep in mind is they are not all created equally. So we have the economy version. This version does not have an exclusion for COVID. And that simply means that they will cover COVID because there's no specific exclusion saying that they won't. But there's no wording in the policy that directly says we do cover it. It is the most basic coverage and it is for the full policy maximum. Then we have the mid-grade policy. This adds COVID or pandemic coverage in the form of an endorsement that specifically states that they are allowing for coverage for anything related to COVID. There might be a few extra perks in that policy with respect to the COVID coverage and possibly a limited maximum. So, they may offer 5 million for everything else, but only 2 million for COVID. Again, the mid-grade version. And finally, we have the luxury version, the kind that gives you all the bells and whistles. So this policy offers $5 million in coverage, not only for anything emergency, accident, sickness, or injury related, but the full $5 million does apply to COVID as well. It offers coverage for hospital and physician costs due to COVID-19, whether or not there is a travel advisory in effect prior to your departure. So you can feel assured that even though the Canadian government has that travel advisory, the policy specifically states, or the endorsement specifically states, that the coverage does apply. It also offers $100 per day to a maximum of $1,400 if you are quarantined at your destination due to a positive test result of COVID, but don't need to be hospitalized. They'll provide also up to $500 for perishable goods, groceries, restaurant orders delivered to you during your quarantine period. And they will provide also up to $100 for taxi fares to and from a COVID testing center. Now, if you're in the United States, this endorsement also includes virtual consultations with a physician. Again, trying to get you on the road to recovery. Now, if this quarantine period ends up being at the end of your stay, there's an automatic extension of the policy on this endorsement. And what that says is that at no charge, the policy will be extended to a maximum of 14 days for the quarantine period. And then after that 14 days, an additional 3 days to give you time to get home. Again, this is the luxury version, and it's a very good policy with a lot of benefits that may be attractive to you. You may look at the mid-grade version and decide for $50 extra, $100 extra, these additional benefits are worth it. Okay. Pat was just asking about coverage while traveling in Canada. So that's a bit easier. We have a lot more options because currently there is no travel advisory issued by the Canadian government to avoid travel across provinces. So we do have a lot of options that will provide you coverage if you do travel within Canada. The next question we often get is, what would I have coverage for? In these policies, you would have coverage for what is medically necessary to treat you, and that includes doctor's visits, hospital stays, needing to be in the intensive care unit, ventilators, any treatment that you would require. It's really hard to address a specific scenario because this is an unprecedented time in the world, both insurance and otherwise. We haven't seen anything like this. So, posed with this question, 11 months ago, it would be a lot easier to answer. But rest assured that, each situation is looked at by the insurance company and the physician at the attending physician at the time of the incident, and what the decisions are made as to what is medically best for you. And yes, I really miss those precedented times when these questions were a lot easier to answer. JV asks who underwrites the Cadillac version. Well, currently the version that we do have is through TourMed, and we're happy to provide you with a quote for both, the mid-grade and the Cadillac and or luxury version. Um, in order to get a quote, we just say, give us some estimated travel dates. We have a few extra medical questions this year to get that quote for you, and we'll be happy to do that. Brenda, does the insurance company ship us home by air ambulance if we had COVID? Very good question, Brenda. The policy does include both benefits for land ambulance and air ambulance. And if continued care is required and it's medically necessary to have you flown home, the insurance company will do that. Now, if you are fit to travel and it's not medically necessary to have you medevaced home, um, then that's a different scenario. But if you are medically in a situation where you have to be medevaced home, you're not able to take a standard flight, then that's a decision the insurance company will review with you or with your doctors at the time. And there is a benefit in the policy for that. Okay. Patrice wants to know if you get an insurance policy and have to cancel the trip for whatever reason before it started, can you cancel the insurance policy and get reimbursed? Yes, Patrice, the short answer is yes. These policies work the same as all policies in the past. You apply for it, you purchase it. Now, if between the time you purchase it and you leave, you have a change in health, you need to let us know. If you have a change in travel dates, you need to let us know. We can either adjust the policy to match your travel dates, or if it's canceled, as long as you let us know prior to that effective date, we can cancel that policy for you for a refund. Am I eligible? How do I qualify? Well, each company that we work with has a different process and different eligibility and rating criteria. So, of course, the richer the benefits, the tighter the qualifying criteria will be. So again, we take your medical information, we take your age, your travel dates, and we look at the questions that the insurance company is asking to determine how you would qualify. Some policies state if you have a pre-existing lung condition and are a smoker, they may not offer COVID coverage. Another company doesn't have that restriction. So, again, we're balancing everything that we have as far as information to get you the possible most benefits possible. And that's called upfront underwriting. And basically, it's all the regular questions. Do you have a heart condition, a lung condition, diabetes, stroke? Are you taking any medications? In addition, we're also, going to have to ask you what is your destination. The policy does, the pricing does get impacted by the number of COVID cases at your destination. We're going to be asking you height and weight, and that's a new question this year. We've never had to ask that before. whether or not you're on any immunosuppressive medications or corticosteroids. These are all factored into the pricing when we're looking at COVID coverage. Okay, Earl is asking, if I fly WestJet to Arizona for 20 days and I get 1 million with you, do I understand that were I to contract COVID and the cost is 1,100,000, the airline would cover 200,000 and the insurance okay. So Earl, what if you have two separate policies, the insurance companies will work together to determine who's responsible for what. So yes, you can do that where you purchase $1 million of coverage. As long as there's nothing in the background of the policy limiting that, you can purchase a policy for 1 million and have the additional 200,000 through the airline, and they would work concurrently. And as long as you qualify and as long as you followed all the rules and there's no clause in the background of that airline policy, you would have both the $1 million and 200,000 to draw from. Ah, can I get the vaccine in the US and is it covered with these policies? No costs for a vaccination are covered under these policies. The vaccine is not something, these policies are designed to cover a medical situation that is occurring that cannot wait for you to get home to receive the care for. So whether that's a sinus infection or a broken leg, those types of things, you need medical care, whether it be an antibiotic or, x-rays and a cast. However, vaccines are a preventative and they're not, these policies aren't designed to cover that. Linda wants to know, does your age range change at 74? It is the 75 age band, Linda. So when you're 74, your price will be one age category, and when you turn 75, you will be into a higher category, and you will see a price increase based on your age alone. Now, back-end underwriting is something that happens at the time of claim. So what you have to watch is some policies do have a clause that states that there may be a limitation on your coverage if there is a quarantine requirement imposed at your destination. So again, you can look online at this website for that information to find out if there is a quarantine restriction. And this is what that exclusion looks like. So this states benefits are not payable under this policy if losses sustained or expenses incurred are the direct or indirect result of any of the following. For any eligible expenses incurred as a result of sickness while under a mandatory or suggested quarantine upon arrival. This exclusion applies if the expenses are directly or indirectly related to the reason for the quarantine. So currently we're talking about COVID. If your destination states that you need to quarantine for 10 days upon arrival, if this is your policy for those 10 days, you will have coverage for everything except for COVID. After that 10 days is done, you will have coverage for COVID again. They're just saying that while you're under quarantine, they're not going to cover you. So that is something to be very aware of. If you have a quarantine period at your destination, be sure to tell us so we can make sure that we get you proper coverage. Eileen wants to know if your age changes during your trip. So your age or your price is based either on age at time of purchase or age at time of departure. Depends on how the policy is worded. So if you do have a birthday coming up and you're going to be 75, it can be beneficial to purchase that policy prior to your birthday. Will the airline bring us home if we test positive? That is up to the airline, but I'm going to say currently, I believe if you test positive prior to your flight, you won't be allowed to board. But that I cannot be 100% certain of, and you do have to check with the airline. Oh, 2020, my husband and I were diagnosed with cancer. What is the stability period? So, pre-existing medical conditions do need to be stable for a certain period of time prior to departure in order for that condition to be covered. So, in this situation, what we would do is we would look for a policy depending on when the last treatment was or when the diagnosis was. We go by the date of the last change of that medical condition. So if you were diagnosed with a new medical condition in June and the treatment for it stopped in August, we would look at your stability period as starting in August. Some policies require you to be stable for 180 days, some 365 days, but we do have policies that do offer coverage for COVID that we can buy down that stability period. So again, you're paying a little bit extra to get coverage for that condition. Now, you may decide that even though the condition is not stable by the insurance company's definition, you feel secure enough to travel without coverage for that condition. And it's that condition that is affected, not all medical costs. Okay, Evelyn wants to know if you receive the vaccine on your own, would the policy be void? No, a vaccine of any kind does not void your policy. Um, so again, most insurance companies recognize that a vaccine is designed to prevent illness. Um, the only drawback would be if you presented symptoms or if you developed a situation after getting the vaccine. Um, you may want to have enough time frame between the time you get the vaccine and when you travel. So things to remember. Rules are changing very rapidly. You know, insurance companies are trying to adjust things and keep on top of things. Again, as I said before, some prices change based on the incident rate of COVID at your destination. So the only way to lock in your price in these instances is to purchase your policy immediately, um, so that the price doesn't increase. Leaving the quote and paying later will result in a different price. It may be as little as $5, $20. It could be as much as $50. So again, knowing that if you had to cancel your policy because you weren't traveling and that you could get a refund if you do it prior to your departure date makes it easier to say, you know what, I'll buy my policy now, I'll preserve my pricing, and I'll worry if that gets changed later. Okay. Again, the insurance company, we're getting a question about being the medevac home if you get COVID. If you do get COVID or any other medical condition, and the insurance company, along with your attending physician, deem it to be medically necessary that you require a medevac flight to bring you home, the insurance company will do that. If it's not medically necessary, meaning you have COVID, but your medical condition isn't severe enough to warrant a medevac, then it won't be covered. So it is decided, and it's not just something the insurance company decides willy-nilly. They do it in consultation with the attending physician that is caring for you at your destination. And a final word about trip cancellation policies. This is another question that we get. Trip cancellation and interruption insurance does protect the dollar value of any trip that you book, and it is meant to protect you from unknown circumstances. Because we all know about COVID and the possibilities of a trip being canceled, this is not something that insurance companies are willing to accept the risk for. So you can still buy a trip cancellation policy. It will cover you if you have a car accident before your departure and can't go. It will cover you if your traveling companion becomes ill and you can't go. But if that illness or if the cancellation is due to COVID, you would not be covered. Now, if you did get a credit from your travel supplier in March, then you should be able to rebook your trip cancellation to your new trip, but definitely something to look into. So we've got time for more questions. So I'm going to look at Carmen. I understand the OHIP is covering some medical expenses out of country. Will you know what they cover? When it comes to medical costs, either in another province or in another country, those medical costs can be submitted to your home province for reimbursement, and you can be reimbursed to the same value had that medical situation happened at home. So if you're traveling and you get a broken leg, and that broken leg outside of your province is $10,000 in medical care, however, at home it would have been $6,000, then it is up to you or your insurance to pay the difference. Um, so I don't know exactly what those fees are and what they will and won't cover. I just know that they do cover some costs, and it's to the equivalent had the medical situation happened at home. Is there anybody else who has any questions? All right. What is OHIP? OHIP is Ontario Provincial Healthcare. Obviously, I said that in the wrong order, but it's like Manitoba Medical. The next age band after 75 is 80. It's in 5-year increments. So, um, you know, the age band goes when you're 59, you're one price. When you're 60, you bump up. When you're 65, you see another increase, 70, 75, and so on. Do you offer yearly plans for multiple trips? Yes, we do, Michael. We do have a yearly plan that does cover multiple trips, and that plan also offers coverage for COVID as well, to a $2 million maximum. So very sufficient coverage. So it is something, and they offer a variety of, I believe it's 16-day, 31-day, and I think it's a 4-day as well. So definitely it is something that we offer. Anybody else? All right. We are going to send, as Matt says, everyone a copy of the presentation and a link to the video, and that'll go out tomorrow morning along with a feedback survey. Please do give us your feedback. It allows us to make sure that we're touching on everything. If you asked a question and I wasn't clear, or if you didn't get to ask your question today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us by phone or by email. And absolutely, we will get that answer to you. Eileen has typed in very quickly, or Linda, is insurance more expensive this year due to COVID? Short answer, yes. But it's not as astronomical in a lot of cases as some people thought. It's far more reasonable. So by all means, if you have a dream trip in mind, get some travel dates, figure it out, give us a call. We're happy to do that to you. Brenda, if you want to talk to somebody, give our office a call. We have a toll-free number, and that's 1-800-661-3098. We have brokers on the line from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, and anyone who answers the phone will be happy to answer your questions. Okay, so if we have, the next question is, we have a 3-week trip booked, but get sick a few days before the end of the trip. Are we still covered, and for how long? So if you do get sick at the end of your trip, your medical costs are covered, and your policy should expire the date you arrive home. If you get sick prior to that and are requiring hospitalization, the policy will extend to cover you while you're in the hospital. And then once you're released, there will be another extension of so many hours to give you time to get home. Depending on the policy, it's 3 days or 5 days. Um, the one policy that we do have, which is that luxury version, if you test positive for COVID or you're sick with COVID and you have to quarantine, but you're not hospitalized, then that specific policy will also extend to keep you covered. Um, Once I get the vaccine, would you suggest still buying COVID insurance? Tough question. You know, if I were speaking to a family member, I would say look at the price difference. And if it's not astronomical, then why not? I would much rather have somebody in my family have more coverage than they need if it's not going to break the bank. And we have actually done comparisons where we have, compared a policy that didn't cover COVID and one that did. And we've offered the one that does cover COVID because it was less expensive. So absolutely check out your options. It's all about weighing the pros and cons. Um, if the coverage with COVID is $50 more, why wouldn't you get that additional coverage just to be on the safe side? Okay. And I'm sorry I have a squeaky voice. Oh, Matt did it already. Okay, thanks, Matt. If you come home early, do you get a refund for the number of days remaining on the policy? Again, each policy is different, but typically the policy states as long as you have had no claims, you're not intending to make a claim, there is a refund available for the unused portion of the policy, but it's usually subject to an administration fee and a minimum. So that is something to be aware of. If you're only going to get 2 or 3 extra days, refunds are pretty slim. But if you come home 2 weeks early or a month early, then for sure it's something that you could certainly look at. I've also added our email address. What if you made a claim but it was rejected? Well, first of all, you should give us a call. If you have a claim and you need any help with that process, just because you bought a policy and you're done, we're not done with you yet. I like to say that we're your warranty. If you have a claim and you need help with it, either filling out the claims forms or if the claim was rejected and you feel that was an incorrect decision, we'll take a look at it for you. Now, if the claim was rejected, then what we will do is we will go to the insurance company. If you're talking about an early return refund, we will go to the insurance company and say, yes, they did make a claim, but it was rejected. Are they still eligible for an early return refund? And we'll do that on a one-off basis. Again, each thing is so that it's looked at individually and not in a cluster. We can't make any promises, but we'll certainly try and give you a hand with that. Where on the policy does it indicate if we have COVID coverage? Well, this is one of those basic policy things that could be happening. You may not have a specific spot on the policy where it says, here is where it says you have COVID coverage. You may simply have a policy that does not have an exclusion. So if it's a policy we've issued, we're certainly able to take a quick look at it and make that determination for you. If it's a policy we haven't issued, then we need to see a copy of the policy wordings to help you determine that answer. Ramona, does COVID insurance cover the cost of a separate room if your roommate gets COVID? No. Um, that would be a trip cancellation and interruption type thing, and they're not covering COVID. So these policies are designed for your medical care, so they're not going to cover you for the costs you incur if your roommate is testing positive. All right. We need to get going, guys, today. So sorry, but please, you have our email address, you have our phone number. Reach out, give us a call, send us an email. We're happy to answer any other questions. And it was a pleasure seeing some different faces for a change. I love my husband, but oh my gosh. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.